Welcome and welcome back to Triple S Breakdowns. Today we're breaking down Alien Romulus. Let's begin. Point number 1. I like to imagine this probe on its way to and from picking up the cocooned Big Chap, Kane's son, Geiger's alien little rascal, alien dessert, whatever you want to call the xenomorph from the first movie, passed by Ripley floating through space and was just like,
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Point number 2, the added touch of the exhaust from the probe looking like water hitting the camera is a cool nod to the exhaust of the Narcissus at the end of the first film, essentially just being bright lights and high pressure water hoses. You can see the water hitting the camera. Point number 3, the imprint of Big Chap in the cocoon looks very similar to the xenomorph on the cover of the book Geiger's Alien. Point number 4, I wonder if there's any meaning behind how the Alien title appears fully complete, but then certain lines disappear until it stops with 3 vertical lines in the middle and 2 slanted lines at either end, which is different to the usual title reveal where lines slowly appear until we end up with the completed Alien title. Point number 5, classic drinking bird, but as well as being a reference to the original movie, it also perfectly captures the monotonous existence of Rain and everyone else on this planet. They are also all drinking birds. Point number 6, I kinda get the feeling these people don't like the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Just a hunch though, I might be wrong. Point number 7, I wonder if in the future Hudson ends up being a fan of this game that Bjorn is playing, considering...
Game over, man! It's game over!
Point number 8. Okay, so they tell Rain they detected the Renaissance and want to get to it before anyone else can, and that the only way to get inside is by using a Weyland-Yutani synthetic.
I prefer the term artificial person myself.
Sorry, artificial person. Giving us explanations for why no one else beats them to the station or shows up while they're on it. No one else has an artificial person. What they don't explain though is how these kids are just allowed to jump into a ship and take off without anyone stopping them, or if they have been given permission to use it, why no one became suspicious when it headed for the Renaissance. Is being able to track a ship's location not a thing at all? Actually, can I just circle back to the idea that they were given permission to use the ship? Who would actually trust these kids to pilot a ship? Wouldn't the company have trained company pilots to pilot the ships to ensure they return in one piece? Or, like artificial person pilots? So that they don't get lost in space or someone wanting to end it all just kamikazes the ship straight into the planet. Point number 9, how big of an idiot is Bjorn to not keep himself close to the ground for when the gravity turns back on? He could have died here and it would have been entirely due to his own stupidity. Point number 10, ooh, is that the Alien Isolation save game phone I see? In an episode of the Inside Total Film podcast, director Fede Alvarez explains why he included the iconic phone in the movie.
So it's funny enough that you mentioned the phone because I realized in the movie it's set up in a way like every time something bad is about to happen, you'll see a phone.
That's the same point over
there. Like in the game, every time in the game you knew it's a phone. It's like, I'm about to go into some bad set piece. It's the same thing here. You'll see they're planted strategically throughout the movie. To when you see the phone is brace for impact.
Point number 11, it's a good thing there weren't any complications on Navarro's end to get to position in time to catch the pods. Point number 12, so if you were assuming the father of Kay's baby is Bjorn, then you are 100% correct. Director Fede Alvarez confirmed this himself in a reply to a post on the subreddit r/LV426. Though hilariously, he was initially banned because the mods assumed he was an impersonator, but when they realized it was the real Fede Alvarez, they unbanned him. Point number 13, we've already learned that Kay and Tyler are siblings and that Bjorn is their cousin. Yes, that does in fact mean Bjorn knocked up his cousin, and we can naturally assume that Tyler and Rain had a previous relationship, but you may also be assuming that Bjorn and Navarro are also possibly romantically involved. The answer to that is actually nope. Multiple sources confirmed that Navarro is actually Bjorn's adopted stepsister, which means he's perfectly fine with getting down and dirty with someone blood related to him, but not with someone who isn't. Blood is thicker than water for Bjorn, I guess. Point number 14, did anyone else think at first that there was going to be people actually in the cryopods? Just me? Okay. Point number 15, this scene of the facehuggers plus the later one when they chase after Tyler and Rain is something I've always wanted to see in an Aliens movie. Just a swarm of facehuggers scurrying their way down a corridor chasing after someone. I finally got to see what I've always wanted to see, but I also hate it because Jesus Christ, it makes my skin crawl. Point number 16, I hate this deepfake so much. I get there be other Ash models of artificial persons, but he's named Rook, like the chess piece, and the only other artificial person named after a chess piece in the Alien movies is Bishop. So why not make this another Weyland-looking artificial person? Did they think the audience would get confused and think it was somehow a ripped-in-half Bishop from the end of Aliens? Actually, if we avoid the whole deepfake thing altogether, which I think they should have done, artist Santiago Vicino actually made Rook a female-presenting artificial person in his storyboards for this film, so why not bring back Winona Ryder? Sure, Cole was an Auton in Alien Resurrection, a second-generation synthetic, but who's to say her physical appearance can also have been used for first-generation synthetics? All I'm trying to say is that there were alternatives that could have been used instead of badly deepfaking Ian Holm, and I think they should have been used, because doing this in the current AI climate where every intelligent person is against its use is just disappointing to see. Point number 17, Rook tells everyone how the Nostromo first came into contact with the Xenomorph 20 years ago, and how only one of the 7 crew members of the ship survived, blowing Big Chap out of the airlock. Now, you might be thinking, how the hell does Rook and Weyland-Yutani know this? Well, while Alien Romulus takes place 20 years after Alien, the game Alien Isolation takes place only 15 years after Alien, and in that game we learn the flight recorder of the Nostromo was found floating in space by the crew of the Anisidora. All the company had to do was listen to the message Ellen Ripley left for her daughter, Amanda Ripley, to learn that a Xenomorph had in fact been on the Nostromo, plus any other recordings Ripley might have made mentioning the deaths of the rest of the crew, like a recording at the end of the first movie possibly. And before you argue, how can Weyland-Yutani get that message when she left it on the Narcissus, not the Nostromo? Ripley also made the message to her daughter whilst on the Narcissus. She tells Amanda she's stuck on a lifeboat and had to blow up the Nostromo. So somehow the recordings Ripley made whilst on the Narcissus after the Nostromo had gone kablooey were being picked up and recorded by the Nostromo's flight recorder. This could also explain how Weyland-Yutani knows Big Chap had been blown out of an airlock. Ripley might have recorded an addendum explaining what happened after destroying the Nostromo and how she harpooned the Xenomorph out into the void. Either that, or the company guessed that since Big Chap was in pretty good condition, he wasn't on the Nostromo when it went kaboom, but instead ended up in space after the fact. And the only way he could have ended up in space after the fact was to have been forcibly ejected, i.e. blown out of an airlock. Point number 18, so after Big Chap was yeeted into the dark abyss by Ripley, it didn't die. Not from being impaled by a harpoon, not from being burned by the Narcissus' engines, and not from being subjected to the harsh vacuum of space, which isn't weird since we've seen they are capable of doing this in Alien Isolation. Instead, it cocooned itself, which is something we haven't seen Xenomorphs ever do in the past, at least in the movies. The closest we get to seeing a Xenomorph in a state of hibernation is the Queen in Alien vs Predator, who is frozen by the Predators when she isn't needed. Point number 19, speaking of Big Chap being impaled by a harpoon, what is this harpoon made of that it hasn't been melted by Big Chap's acidic blood? Point number 20, really neat touch to show the skull inside Big Chap's head, which you couldn't really make out in the first movie but can see pretty clearly in production stills. Point number 21, lucky as all hell the Corbelan ended up making its way into the Romulus hangar and not just, crashing more violently into the station or careening off into space. Point number 22, god, I fucking hate how the facehuggers are holding up their front fingers like they're tarantulas or something. And no, I will not show a picture of a tarantula holding its front legs up for comparison as a favour to all my fellow arachnophobes out there, and because if I search for tarantula in Google Images, I would most likely faint. Point number 23, so I always just assumed a chest burster just kept molting and molting, getting bigger and bigger each time until it reached its full size. But I guess it actually turns out after molting once, it cocoons itself to its surface and then bursts itself out of its wall vagina when it's fully grown. Side note, this cocoon also reminds me of the Queen's womb in Alien Resurrection, which I wouldn't have thought of if I hadn't just rewatched that movie. Anyway, lots of cocooning in this movie, and this is the second biggest pussy I've ever seen, with the first being Andrew Tate. Plus, the cocoon looking like a vagina was an intentional choice as revealed by director Fede Alvarez in an interview with Collider. I read at the time that H.R. Geiger wanted the eggs to have a vagina. You've seen the design most likely, that is an egg like this and has a vagina on the top. That's what the original design for the eggs were for the first film. Then Fox wouldn't let him do it was just too explicit. That's why we put it on the cocoon in the wall. We were like, let's just make sure Geiger gets what he wants in this one, and we put the big vagina on the wall. What Geiger did at the time, he said he turned it into a cross. He said at the time that he had the final laugh because he put not just one, but 2 vaginas together at the top of the egg. Point number 24, silly Bjorn, just because the stun baton worked on Andy doesn't mean it'll also work against the alien. It's like you've never played Alien Isolation before. Point number 25, a penis coming out of a vagina? I think I've seen this hentai before. Point number 26, it's cool you can see the sparking in the head of the Xenomorph here, and more clearly when it gets in Rain's face later on in the movie, from where the tip of the shock baton broke off, and I guess wasn't being melted by the acidic blood, but instead is just continuing to be powered by it. Because of having these sparks go off inside its head, this Xenomorph has been given the nickname Scorched. Makes sense? Nah, it doesn't to me either. When I think scorched, I think something that's been burned. The Fallout part of my brain also makes me think of the Scorch from Fallout 76, but that's besides the point. But when I see electric sparks going off inside the Xenomorph's head, I think of names like Sparky or Lecky, which is a fun Scottish slang word I learned from the game Still Wakes the Deep.
I'm good with a lecky.
Or, ooh, how about Taserface? Maybe not. In any case, while Scorched isn't the best name they could have come up with for this particular Xenomorph, giving it the sparking electricity inside its head is a cool way to make it stand out from the rest. Though I do still think the design of Grid from Alien vs Predator is still the best unique design they've ever given to a Xenomorph. Point number 27, I'm sure I'm not the only one who thought the facehuggers were primarily reacting to the sounds happening over the headset, but upon a rewatch I saw the skin of Tyler's arm turn goose flesh and his forehead is sweaty, which means it was more the change in his body temperature that set off the facehugger attack. Point number 28, I love the incorporation of the theme of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few that runs throughout this movie and really this entire franchise. Obviously in regards to synthetics, with one sacrificing 3 miners, one of whom was Bjorn's mother to save a dozen, and Andy essentially sacrificing Kay to save Rain and Tyler. But then also in regards to humans as well, the company, both the humans and the synthetics they control like Ash and Rook, are perfectly happy sacrificing people to get their hands on the Xenomorph because, as we later learn, they hope to use it to benefit the many. And then even Rain and the rest of these meatbags are guilty of this because they were prepared to sacrifice Andy so that they could go on to live a better life on Yavaga. Hell, even in Alien Resurrection, yes, Alien Resurrection again, the Xenomorphs display this philosophy by sacrificing one of their own so its acidic blood will make a hole in the floor, allowing them to escape. Then in Prometheus we have an engineer sacrificing themselves to create life, to create many, but then we also get the reverse of that with Wayland potentially risking the lives of many people just for himself to get the chance to meet the engineers with the hope that they will make him young again. And the same thing goes for David in Alien Covenant, sacrificing the planet of engineers and Shaw all for his own ambitions, which also in a sort of ironic way also has him benefiting the many by trying to perfect his own version of the Xenomorphs, creating life, creating many. Jesus Christ, no one is free from this sin in this universe. Oh, and speaking of Prometheus and Alien Covenant, point number 29, at first I was right there with everyone else shaking my head that this movie just had to include the goddamn black goo from Prometheus and Alien Covenant. But upon rewatching and giving it more thought, I actually think including the black goo was the right decision, and it even makes me like Prometheus and Alien Covenant more now. A big problem with Prometheus and Alien Covenant is that it led people to believe it was, in fact, David who created the Xenomorphs that we know and love from the original movies. This is a misconception. We already know Xenomorphs existed before David started his experiments due to there being a mural of one that we see in the room with the steatite ampules. And I believe when the black goo infects someone and starts its journey, the end result will always be a form of Xenomorph with the life cycle of egg, facehugger, chestburster, Xenomorph, queen, and repeat. This end result, though, could take many years to finalize, so David's experiments were just him aiding it along, accelerating it to its conclusion, whilst also attempting to incorporate his own alterations to make his own version of the Xenomorphs. What is revealed about the black goo in this movie gives this belief credence. Rook reverse engineered facehuggers using DNA taken from Big Chap, and in those facehuggers he discovered the black goo. And as we all know, Big Chap came from a facehugger that came from an egg that was on an engineer ship on the planet LV-426. So it either have to be a very big coincidence that David came up with the idea of the life cycle including eggs and facehuggers that other Xenomorphs in other parts of the galaxy also used in their life cycle, or as I said I believed, it's that egg, facehugger, chestburster, Xenomorph, queen is just the life cycle that the black goo always ends up creating in some fashion or another. Or it'll be revealed in the future that David ended up bumping into the engineers again and they took his own Xenomorph design and life cycle, used it to make a bunch of eggs, loaded those eggs onto a ship, and that ship ended up crashing on LV-426. But that'd be a pretty shitty explanation in my opinion. Also, this whole misconception that David created the Xenomorphs has of course always been a complete impossibility for all those who include the Alien vs Predator movies in their canon of the Alien franchise. Because how could David have possibly created the Xenomorphs if they existed all the way back in 2004? Unless of course the Predators had access to time travel. Point number 30, also in regards to Prometheus and the black goo, there's a debate on whether what the engineer drinks at the start of the movie is black goo or something else. The main argument against it being the black goo is that it just disintegrates the engineer when it enters his body, instead of mutating him like the black goo does to those it comes into contact with later on in the movie. But now with this movie and Rook saying that the black goo in one form can be the most destructive pathogen ever observed, but with a few alterations it can instead be used to create life, to heal, this suggests that there are different types of black goo that do different things, and what the engineer drank at the start of Prometheus was the black goo in its destructive form, disintegrating the engineer down to its DNA, and that the black goo we see in the rest of Prometheus was it in its life-creating form. And since Rook says he extracted black goo from facehuggers, that most likely means they use it in their egg-laying process, pumping black goo along with an egg into their victims, or maybe just like a black goo egg. Black goo eggs and bacon makes for a great breakfast. Point number 31, Andy saying,
Most overdue upgrade, I must say.
after being given Rook's module and then Rook calling the black goo
A much needed and well overdue upgrade for humanity.
really goes to show how much Andy is being influenced by Rook besides an accent change, and plays into the theme that while the upgrade may help in the short term, in the long term it actually proves to be detrimental. Upgrading Andy helped them to escape the released facehuggers, but also ended up turning him against his friends and doing what is now best for the company rather than for Rain. The black goo helped the crushed mouse recover, but ended up horrifically mutating it, and Kay injecting herself with it allowed her to make it to the Corbelin, but ended up turning her baby into a monster. Point number 32, with Tyler showing Rain how to handle a pulse rifle being an obvious reference to Hicks showing Ripley how to handle a pulse rifle in Aliens, this movie transitions from resembling Alien to now resembling Aliens. The high resin, the increase in the amount of xenomorphs of course, them crawling towards Tyler like they crawl through the goddamn walls, and Rain firing her auto-assist pulse rifle at the xenomorph swarm is like the auto-sentry gun scene from the special edition of Aliens, complete with someone reading out how much ammo percentage is left. Plus, you could even say Rain going back for Andy is like a Ripley going back for Newt, even if the scene of Rain with a pulse rifle walking through a xenomorph hive is significantly shorter than when Ripley did it. Point number 33, I mean, it's cool we get to see the blue mist again from the first movie, but what would have been cooler would be if we got an explanation as to what the mist actually is for, what it actually does, how it's made. I mean, it showing up here on a human space station suggests it's something more to do with the xenomorphs making it rather than something used by the engineers. I just would have liked a bit more information revealed about it, you know? Point number 34, if you're wondering why Sparky caught Rain instead of letting her fall to her death, I think the most likely answer is because it wanted to do to her what the xenomorphs had done to the other humans, let a facehugger facehug her. Which just makes me think of how in the 2010 Alien vs Predator game, when you're playing through the Alien campaign, you can pin certain humans to the ground to allow a facehugger to latch onto them. Point number 35, from what I can tell, this is the one and only reference to Alien 3 in this entire movie, though even then Sparky doesn't get as close to Rain as the dragon did to Ripley. Point number 36, and here we have the worst line in the entire movie.
Get away from her, you bitch.
While dialogue from the previous films has been referenced before,
I can't lie about your chances, but you have my sympathies.
I can't lie to you about your chances, but you have my sympathies.
Busy little creatures.
Busy little creatures.
I prefer the term artificial person myself.
I prefer the term artificial person myself.
for example, Andy saying the classic Ripley line from Aliens,
Get away from her, you bitch!
just doesn't sound right coming from him in this instance. Like, I get Andy has heard the word bitch a number of times from Bjorn throughout this movie, so that's why he probably said it, but when Ripley used it in Aliens, it's because she was insulting a queen. In my opinion, I think it would have worked better if Andy had either just stopped at,
Get away from her.
or he said,
Get away from her.
you dick, which I think would have sounded better coming from him. Point number 37, and the ending of this movie is essentially the endings of Alien and Alien Resurrection combined. We have Rain essentially in her underwear getting ready to go into cryo just like Ripley at the end of Alien. We have the offspring, a hybrid just like the hybrid newborn from the end of Alien Resurrection. Rain gets herself into a spacesuit just like Ripley at the end of Alien. Rain uses acid to create a hole in the ship to vent the atmosphere just like Ripley does at the end of Alien Resurrection, though in that instance she used her own acidic blood. And then Rain records a final message before going into cryo just like Ripley did at the end of Alien, with both messages sharing similar wording. Point number 38, nope, fuck nope. Screw this one particular shot, dude. This is the creepiest shit in the whole film and it can fuck right off. Point number 39. It's no coincidence that the offspring looks a hell of a lot like an engineer, considering us humans came from engineered DNA, just with some xenomorph features added on. What is apparently a coincidence is the similarity between the offspring and the newborn from Alien Resurrection. From an interview director Fede Alvarez had with Variety, surprisingly, Alvarez says he actually hadn't thought of the latter connection until his son pointed it out at the film's premiere. He had recently watched with a buddy of his all of the Alien movies, and when the offspring comes out, he goes, "It's like in Resurrection. I hadn't really processed that way, but it's true. It's this abomination that comes out," the director says, explaining that it had actually been more focused on the mythology of Scott's prequels, Prometheus and Alien Covenant, which explored the genetic building blocks of humans and aliens both. "I was hoping that people picked up the whole engineer part of it," he says. "The black goo is the root of the whole thing that was introduced in Prometheus," Alvarez explains. "It's the root of all life, but also particularly the xenomorphs come out of that thing, which means it has to be inside them. It's the xenomorph semen almost. So we thought, if it affects your DNA and the engineers clearly came out of the same root of life, it made complete sense to me that the offspring of a human and a xenomorph was going to look like that." Far from reconciling the various plot lines and chronologies, Alvarez admits that the resulting life form probably raises more questions than answers. It's probably a new species, because that mix never happened before. So I guess what he's essentially saying is this is less of a human xenomorph hybrid like the newborn in Alien Resurrection was, but more of a result of xenomorph and engineered DNA mixing together inside of a human womb, creating something entirely new. Point number 40. It's really cool that for the most part the offspring is a practical effect and not an animatronic. It's 7'7" basketball player Robert Bobrzynski in a suit. And in the Collider article I mentioned earlier in the video, Fede Alvarez talks about, I believe, this shot of the offspring, saying, "It was a mix of inspiration, thinking about what can lay an egg and also the cross vagina that kind of creates that strange shape. Everybody's staring at it in that shot. That shot is fully practical. There's no CG whatsoever in that shot. The only thing might be the tail, which sometimes needed to be CG, but you can barely see the tail in that shot." And speaking of the offspring's tail, point number 41, it's cool to see the offspring's tail grow right before our eyes as it sucks out what at first I thought was Kay's blood, but I think might actually be the black goo coming out of her breasts in place of milk. Drinking the black boob goo might be what's helping it grow so quickly. This also connects to the tale of Romulus and Remus, who suckled from a she-wolf in their infancy, and to the painting Bjorn looks at early in the movie of a baby suckling on the breast of a dead woman. To round all this off, my most disliked part of the movie goes to the deepfake of Ian Holm, for obvious reasons. God, it's so bad. And my most liked part of the movie goes to finally seeing something I've always wanted to see in an Alien movie, and that's a swarm of facehuggers chasing after people down a corridor. Love it. Thank you all for watching Triple S Breakdowns. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, sub, share and comment. I also have a variety channel where I post a variety of different videos. If any of them interest you, check them out. I've been Triple S, you've all been amazing, and I shall see you all in the next video.